Hi developers, in this video we will learn about HTTP client in Angular. So what is HTTP client? It is the service provided by HTTP client module to perform HTTP operations like get, post, put, delete, etc. to communicate with the backend APIs. Okay. So what are its use cases? So fetching data from a REST API, example getting a list of users, sending data to a server. Okay. Example adding a new user using post request. Okay, updating data on a server, example editing user details, okay, using put request, put method, and deleting data from a server, that is removing a user from the server using delete method. Okay, so for that we need to import the HTTP client module from Angular/common/HTTP. It is essential for using the HTTP client. Okay, so HTTP client, what it is? It is a service provided by HTTP client module. To use that HTTP client, we need to import HTTP client module. Okay. So this HTTP client service, it is injected into the component via the constructor. So it allows us to perform HTTP requests like get, post, put, and delete. So let's create a component user list, and we will fetch the data from some URL, and we'll display that data in the user list component. nggc user list. So we are generating a component. So 4 files will be generated. One is template file, one is CSS file, and one is component file. And this spec file we can delete it for now because it's useful for testing purposes, unit test cases. So we did it right now, we are deleting it. Okay. So now this is the template file, user list. Here in the UI we will display the list of users that we will fetch from a specific URL. Okay. This is the component file. So firstly what we need to do, we need to import the HTTP client module because we need to use HTTP client service. So let's go to app component. Here we will import HTTP client module. Okay, so it is imported automatically from Angular common HTTP. So now what we need to do, let's go to user list component. Now here we need to import the HTTP client. Okay. So let's create a variable users. Okay. So to store the fetched user data, the data we will fetch from a specific URL. So fetch user data. Okay. So now we need to inject the users of type any. Let's declare it empty array first. Now we make a constructor private HTTP of type HTTP client service. Okay. So now we can import this. Okay, HTTP client is imported successfully from Angular/common/HTTP. Okay. We can write it here also. Import. And here in the user list component, we will use for loop to display the users, list of the users. For that we need to import common module also. Common module. Okay. Because we will be using ng for and off loop. Okay. So we have injected the HTTP client service. we are commenting get the HTTP client service. Okay. So now the next step is, once the component is initialized, okay, we will call a method, and that method will call the API and will get the user list. Okay. So let's create an ng on init. Type void because it will return nothing. Okay. This dot. Let's create a method. This dot get users. What this method will do? It will fetch users when the component loads. Okay. So what is ng on init? It is a lifecycle hook that runs when the component is initialized. Lifecycle hook that runs when the component initialized. Okay. So let's define this method get users. So what this method will do? So this is a method to fetch users using HTTP client. Okay. So now in this method, what we will do? We will define an API const API URL. Okay. So let's write a dummy URL. So this URL, what it will do? It will provide the list of users. Okay. Is JSON placeholder. .com. Okay, slash users. Okay. Let's go to this URL and we will see what is present there. Okay, so this is the URL having some data. This we will fetch using the HTTP client service. Okay, and we'll store in a variable. And that variable we will show in the UI. That will show the list of all users in the UI. Okay, so this is the URL of the API. URL of the API. Okay. So now what we need to do? We need to make an HTTP GET request. So what it will do? It will go to this URL and will fetch the users list. Okay. Make an HTTP GET request. Okay. So this instance we will take it this dot HTTP that will use the HTTP client service dot get. We will use GET request. Okay. GET will be of type any. Okay. And here we will provide the API URL. API URL. Okay. Dot subscribe. We will subscribe to it. Response. Because it will provide an observable, we need to subscribe that. Okay. This dot users is equals to response. The response will come here, and we are storing that response in the users array. That is the variable which we have declared. Okay. So what we are doing here, we are assigning the response to the users array. Okay. So now, so let's console it also. Fetched users. then this dot users. We will print it in the console for debugging purpose. Okay. And suppose there is an error in fetching the response. So we will handle it here. Error console dot error. We will see in the console like what is the error. Error fetching users, comma error. What it will do, it will handle any errors. Okay. So what we have done, we have imported the HTTP client module in the parent component. Okay. That is useful for HTTP client service, which we are using in the user list component. Okay. Here we have imported the HTTP client. Okay. And it is injected into the component via the constructor. So it will allow us to perform HTTP requests like get, post, put and delete. We are seeing the example of get. Okay. So we have defined the URL. Okay. Currently the URL is hard coded. Okay. In this example, and in the real projects, it's usually stored in the configuration file or environment variables. Okay. Now we are making an HTTP GET request. So the GET method of HTTP client is used to fetch data from the API. This is the API URL we have mentioned here. It will fetch the data from this API, and the response will be an observable, which we subscribe to it using .subscribe method to handle the response. This is the response and this is the error. We will handle it, the response and errors. Okay. So the response, we will be storing it in the users variable, users array. And if case of any errors, it will console it. Okay. And on a successful response, what it is doing, the data is stored in the users array. And in case of any errors, they are logged into the console for the debugging purposes. Okay. So once we got this, so let's check it in the console. What is the data coming or not? So let's do npm run start. So once we got the data, once we get the data, we will display it in the UI. For that, we will use ng4 directive to loop through the users array and will display the user's name in a list. Okay. This is our template file. Here what we will do, okay, let's check what it is coming. This list component in the app component. We have put the router outlet here. We will add user list also, app user list, to display the component here. Okay. App user list is not a unknown component. If app user list is known, then verified it. Okay, we need to import it in the app component also. Here we will import it, app user list. Okay, only user list component. User list component. We will import it, save it. Let's go to the UI. Okay, so this is the user list we are getting. Okay, and let's check it in the console whether we are getting the data or not. Okay, so we have seen we have got the data in the console. Okay, so for now we will print only the name in the UI. Let's compile it. we will see only the user list component in the UI. Okay. So here, let's create a user list component. Let's create a list. Okay. So what we will do here, we will loop through the users array, because the data is stored in the users array. We will loop through it and will display the usernames only. Okay. Let's get a list tag. Here we will use ng4 directive to loop through the array. Let user of users. Okay. Because we have stored it in the users. All the data is in the users array. Okay. So here we will display only user dot name. Okay. So as we can see in the console, let's check it. So in the console, we are getting a list of array. So we will fetch users dot name only. Okay. So it is displaying users dot name only. Okay. So what we have done, we have looped through the users array to display the user's name. Okay. This is the users array, and we are displaying only the user dot name. One by one, it will go to the each element of array and it will bring the name here. Okay. So this is the example of HTTP client service to use the get method. Okay.